This is our first episode with Jomo. I don't know. Do you think many people know that Jomo is a GP? Do you think at this point everyone knows that Jomo is a GP? I hope that that's understood and well known. But yeah, we're super excited to have Jomo on the podcast today. Hi, Jomo. How are you?
Hey Isabel, hey Asher, thanks for having me. My
Little
I
known.
first
think people
podcast.
know that Domo is a GP of Unbroken Chain. He's been a GP since the beginning, basically.
That's true. That is true. That is true. And now we're bringing him into the Unbroken Chain pod, you guys, hopefully to be a regular contributor to the Unbroken Chain pod. Should we all jam about the spot market right now? I feel like maybe it might be time to do a little Bitcoin spot market update. I think you said what you think all-time highs could happen this week. I mean, that's sort of a plausible reality.
In my opinion, it is. Yeah, I think Bitcoin is putting in some pretty strong groundwork right now. We're trying to break this intermediate high from May 20th right now, and we're getting really close. Um, and my view is that, like I've been saying, we're likely on the way to doing that. And I think what you're seeing in the ordinals market and in the runes market is sort of the anticipation of that already.
I know, I love it. Ordinals, they're starting to climb. We're seeing what? So like Node Monks is climbing, but we're cautiously optimistic about Node Monks right now.
So node monks bottomed at around 0.22, 0.23, and we're already back up to 0.29 on it, which it's a significant move, and it looks like like we've broken the trend. But I mean, I still think it's worth being somewhat cautious on that until all-time highs are broken.
It is amazing. I mean, it's interesting. Node Monks are, I think, pretty substantially above opiums right now. I feel like we already have such a large opium position that we probably don't need to acquire more, but I do kind of feel like opiums are still a catch right now.
And Bitcoin puppets have pumped a lot too, in the last couple of days.
Yay.
So puppets
Yeah.
were down to 0.14 and now they're up to 0.19. So they've moved a tremendous amount, and opiums have moved too. I mean, the reality is the Bitcoin. So, depending on when this comes out, I think it's worth just making it clear we've been going through pretty brutal correction on ordinals, runes, BRC20 across the board, since Bitcoin hit all-time highs. And we're filming this podcast on June 4th, and it really does look like that's finally turned around. And we were on the Ordinals show yesterday, and we sort of publicly called a bottom. So it's nice that's panning out.
Yeah, that's good. Good for pat on the back. Not an easy feat.
Yeah, exactly.
Love it when that happens. Yeah, no, I'm excited. I can feel the energy moving. We're doing a Twitter Spaces today with Mario Nafwal's team, and the title of the Twitter Spaces are Ordinals and Runes Still Dead? But I mean, it might even be out of date by the time we get on the Spaces today. Who knows?
Hilarious. Well, they're
Yeah.
especially dead now.
They're especially dead. We made some big scores, I think, as a fund during this Ordinals are dead period. I mean, we've been, on the acquisition train during this bottoming period. What were our biggest scores in this little correction?
So we have basically been accumulating mostly node monks and shrooms. So the fund has bought a pretty large amount of node monks down in the 0.23, 0.24 and up region. Basically we had Isabel and Domo and I had all been talking, and we were all, I think, of the opinion that now is the time to be deploying capital. And frankly, we're still deploying capital. It's one of the things that Isabel and I have talked about a lot from like a trading perspective is, we try to avoid as a trading firm, we try to avoid catching knives, which is essentially, trying to time a bottom without any evidence that a bottom is actually there. And the reason for that is because you can get faked out. And if you look up the node monks chart, you can see that having happened to the buyers. I mean, it's just happened over and over and over. So it's really hard to catch that. And I guess, my view is once the lowest risk time and often the best trade in these contexts are on the way back up. So instead of trying to buy it on the way down, you buy it once we've started the recovery, which is, I think, exactly where we are right now.
I love it. Yeah, no, this is like a super important lesson that you've taught me, Asher.
Yeah, everybody tries to be hero so they can claim clout buying the bottom, but it's rarely a smart idea in my opinion.
Yeah,
Is
and
there,
it's just worth it.
should we talk about the A16Z shroom that we acquired? We got some good shrooms. So which shrooms did we get? We got, because we talked about the shrooms that we were looking at on the pod for our regular listeners. So which ones did we actually acquire?
So
We
we've
talked about the
acquired.
A16Z shroom, I think, on the pod. We did buy it.
We did. We talked about buying it, and then we ended up buying it. So we got 4 shrooms. The first shroom that we got was an open dime shroom. Um, they call the ones that are unidentified UFOs, unidentified fungal objects, which I think is just hilarious. Shroom Toshi basically had a tweet thread where he explained the title and description of every shroom that he wanted to give a name to. There are a number that don't have names and don't have descriptions still. We bought 2 of those. They're called unidentified fungal objects. But the thing is that we know what they are. I mean, it's obvious. So one of them, like I just said, is a coin kite open dime. I actually tweeted a picture side by side of the shroom right next to the actual coin kite product, so that it just for the sake of history that we can put it to rest exactly what this shroom is. Um, and I'll just say very quickly, that's a device that, I think is pretty familiar within the Bitcoin community because, we used to use something called paper wallets, and a paper wallet literally was you'd print the private key on a piece of paper, and the public key was on that same piece of paper, and you would send the Bitcoin to that pub key, and then you'd give somebody that piece of paper. And then that was literally, it was like a bare instrument of Bitcoin. But the problem with it was it exposed the private key. So it wasn't a safe way to actually gift a wallet. Open Dime created a technology where you actually have to stick a needle through the device to expose the private key. Until you do that, the private key is completely encrypted and masked on the USB drive. So it's a super cool product. And it's a product I've used personally to give to family members. I mean, bar and bat mitzvahs in my family, I've given people open dimes with Bitcoin. When I give people Bitcoin, that's how I do it. So it's, not, it wasn't the reason that we bought it, but it's definitely something that I've known, and it's a product that I've loved.
It's a badass reference, right? Like people who love Bitcoin, like hardcore OG Bitcoiners, love CoinKite products in general. And certainly, that's like an open dime reference is a reference for hardcore Bitcoiners. I also think, right? I mean, like this is the magic of shrooms. Like shrooms is like an homage to Bitcoin, right? The entire shrooms collection, most of the pieces in the shrooms collection are sort of like, I don't want to call them like inside jokes, but they're diehard Bitcoiner references, and we love that.
Yeah, it's all history and cultural references to significant things within Bitcoin. And I do think it's that the open dime is significant in that it was the evolution of the paper wallet. The paper wallet is just not necessary anymore, and that's a huge deal.
Shroom
Um,
Toshi was a self-identified Bitcoin maximalist, and actually little known fact about Shroom Toshi that he told us, over the phone when we were able to have the privilege of a phone call with him, was that he was never involved with Ethereum NFTs. He didn't own any Ethereum or any NFTs from any other blockchain. Shroom Toshi, the only NFTs he's ever made in his life were the first collection of original inscriptions on Bitcoin. Pretty fucking epic. Um, and now he's
Total
peaked out and he's gone and he's Satoshi Nakamoto'd it. What a G.
Total legend, total
Yeah.
fucking legend, honestly. And I had mentioned to Domo the other day, though, you know, the proficiency of which he also made his money and like was able to get a good price for these things and get on the road. I mean, just every level of it was masterfully executed. Moving on, I want to get through these shrooms really quickly so we know what they are. And then um the other three that we got are it's called Fiat Money or TikTok Next Block. This one is it's a picture of a block, or I'm sorry, of a bomb. Should I share my screen and show these, or does it not
Yeah,
matter?
you should. I think you should. Yeah, it makes a difference if we're looking at something, just share your screen because it gives the viewers something like a reference. It's like easier to follow, I think.
Doma, what do you think about shrooms in general? Do you have any views about them?
Yeah, I mean, I mirror your what you said about the way that the sale went. I think it was optimized for the seller, less optimized for the market, the secondary market, at least in the short term. I think it'll take a bit of churn for it to kind of find its feet, just because it didn't really lend much upside to the primary buyers. And moreover, just the liquidity of it just takes like most of the sales are going to happen in a very short period of time. I think that's what we've seen in Ethereum. The really high value collections like go through fits and starts of sales. So keeping those things in mind, like I'm definitely bullish shrooms. It just might take a little while to manifest, and then exiting is probably quite key in taking liquidity when you can, just due to the nature of the collection, small size, big ticket size.
So I think those are just really great points, and I agree with that. And that was sort of like um, the reason that we were patient in buying these is that we were hoping, and it ended up happening that prices would come down on these substantially, which they did. And you know, the reason for that, I think, that we had talked about on previous podcasts is the fact that it was, you know, such a large amount of very, very expensive, high value supply went out all at once. And a lot of the people that bought these assets don't aren't thinking about them in the way that we are. So, for example, you know, the shrooms, you know, we consider these to be the most graily collection, and frankly, some of the most graily pieces within the most graily collection. This is, you know, we do a lot of short-term trading. This is not one of them. This is a long-term trade for us. So I think that, you know, there were a lot of people that thought they were going to be able to turn this into a quick flip. And I just don't think shrooms are that.
No, this is something that like we could potentially hold for multiple cycles, right? I mean, this is a real these are something that you don't sell easily, you know.
The other consideration is because it's a small collection size and it's not really affiliated with any larger collection size, that community voice is smaller. So new people to the ecosystem, they see the puppets posting, they see the node monkeys posting, but it takes on for quite a bit of time getting into the ecosystem to really find shrooms, in my opinion, for new users. And it's going to just take a little bit of time to build that mind share. Fortunately, it's probably one of those things that's quite inevitable because it's got about as strong provenance as you can get. But again, it's just going to take time.
Yeah, I
Do you
totally
guys
agree.
have a point of view about rocks? It's interesting to even think, I mean, no one's talking about rocks right now, obviously, but it's interesting to kind of think about Bitcoin rocks now since there's like more, I think, energy and like more looking at what's going on with shrooms and how rocks maybe um could or will perform relatively speaking. Do you have a point of view, either of you?
Um,
Oh, actually, you go ahead.
I mean, my view on rocks is that I think they hold like a very special place in Ordinals history. Um, I think they're going to perform. I don't think they'll perform as well as Shrooms. I think that so the thing is that I think that relative to Shrooms, I think rocks are overpriced, and relative to rocks, Shrooms are underpriced. And
And
I
the
think
problem was distribution, right? I mean, Raktoshi's distribution mechanism is not ideal, right? Because he's sort of not artificially, but he's pumped up the price so high by just refusing to sell unless they're, I mean, I think like he personally is like uninterested in selling a rock below like 3 or 4 Bitcoin a piece, which means they like hardly ever move. And what that practically means also is that he holds an enormous amount of supply, which then also makes buyers nervous. And so there's some distribution issues, I think, with rocks.
there's distribution issues. I think Raktoshi deserves credit for drumming up a lot of attention and support for that project early on, and making it like, frankly, probably the first Grail collection on Ordinals that really existed to some degree, and the first like status symbol on Ordinals. And I think that that is significant, and I don't think that's going to go away. But just to explain my point before about relatively being overpriced, relative to Shrooms, and Shrooms being underpriced relative to rocks, I think it's um, like Shrooms have everything that rocks has, and rocks has nothing that Shrooms has.
Hmm.
And that's like, like the low inscription number thing. Shrooms has it. And in addition to that, Shrooms is not derivative, it's completely original. In addition to that, it's culturally significant specifically to Bitcoin. Whereas the rocks thing, that's an Ethereum thing. And I get like that's
That's
like
kind of the
net.
joke though, right?
No, I know it is, but it
Still.
it's a funny joke, but it's still derivative.
Yeah, no, totally, totally. And it's like they're kind of boring, right? Like they're not as unique. Like if you have a rock, you just have a rock. Whereas like if you have a shroom, you have like the A16Z shroom or the coin kite shroom or whatever.
And when we used, and it's just my perspective, but like we used a rock as, we announced that rock, we were proud of that rock when it was like one of our first high profile trades. We bought two distressed rocks, which I think were, frankly, I think they were great trades, Isabel. And I'm like, we didn't like dump those immediately. We hold three right now.
Yeah.
Um, so it's not an asset that we're like bearish on by any means. Um, I mean, the minute we had the ability though to change our fund PFP to a shroom, we did.
I
And
would, yeah. Go
and,
ahead.
and honestly, like I think shrooms, and you would ask like, what am I excited about? I think shrooms are from my perspective, and this isn't like a fund position. This is Asher. I think shrooms are the coolest collection in Ordinals.
I'm with you. I get that. One thing that Rogtoshi, just in all fairness to Bitcoin rocks, one thing that they do have is they are number one. They are the first contiguous collection of ordinals, period, end of discussion. So they do have that. I mean, they are an earlier collection than Shrooms. They are the first collection of excuse me, Freudian slip, of inscriptions ever. So they do have that going for them. And also the rock thing is almost like it's like a membership club. Like Raktoshi runs a membership club. It's like the special Discord server and the Telegram, group for the people who are the rock holders, and everyone who holds a rock is like, basically like a fancy like rich person NFT it's a little bit of a club.
But I agree with that. And I'm curious what Domo thinks about this. But I think that 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 sounds like utility to me, and that's bearish. Because honestly, like that didn't work out for Bored Ape Yacht Club. Because what ended up happening is over time that cachet went away. And then when that cachet went away, it was reflected in the asset price. And the fact that that expectation exists, that could create an overhang.
Well, I don't think the cachet is going to go away from Bitcoin rocks because of the provenance. I think the cachet will stay. I think the reason why it's not sustainable is because it depends on Raktoshi actually holding the group together and doing things, which he might not want to do, right? It's just like any like effort that must be put forth by a project founder is bearish, in my opinion, right? Because it's like key man risk,
Yes,
which is something we talk about a lot, key man risk.
totally. And then Shrumtoshi leaving, he eliminated that.
He eliminated the key man risk, which we love. Um,
Just
Elma,
a
what do you think about this?
perspective of shrooms being a derivative, sorry, rocks being a derivative. And
So
I don't
rocks
know.
derivative and rocks like versus shrooms in terms of like
Yeah.
what's your like your gut instinct?
Yeah. I mean, I think I agree. Like, I think shrooms probably take the cake in terms of like the maximum upside. My one point about it being a derivative is this might be like nerd sniping a little bit, but if there was ever a collection to do a derivative of from Ethereum to Bitcoin, funny enough, it is actually rocks. And I don't know if that was intentional or like a massive stroke of luck. And I think this is something that they should lean into. Not too many people know that the Ethereum smart contract was pre 721 ERC 721 standard on Ethereum, meaning that all they are is the token. Like you're just trading this token with a serial number 1 to 100 or whatever it is. And then those images aren't actually linked within the smart contract itself. There's like a social consensus that rock 1 maps to image 1, which is in a centralized database, not an IPFS, not anything. Whereas Bitcoin rocks is the complete opposite. So the image is on chain, but as we know with inscriptions and ordinals, the token actually doesn't exist. It's like a social consensus that this image is tied to this particular Satoshi. So it's the inverse. So it's like almost like a yin and a yang, where one is the token but not the art, and the other is the art but not the token. And I think that would be in the best interests of Bitcoin rocks to really lean into that, because Ethereum rocks has always been this like performance art kind of thing where it's just so silly, so ridiculous. Moreover, with this like technical bug that they have, it almost is like a complementary aspect to that. And again, I don't know if this was intentional. Absolutely brilliant if it was. But if I was a rock holder, I think that's what I would personally lean into. And actually, being a derivative may be an advantage in this case. Just wanted to get that in for rocks. Nonetheless,
I
I just think
agree.
that I
I
think
agree. I don't
Shrooms
think derivative.
is
Oh, go ahead.
interesting, more interesting, original, Bitcoin themed, etc., etc. So I think, moreover, it's a bigger collection. If I don't recall, which gets more mind share, people can use it as their PFP. It lays to that flywheel effect. So I'm with Asher there. I just wanted to get that tidbit in about rocks, or I like them personally.
I'm with you on rocks. I don't necessarily think the derivative thing. I think the derivative of being rocks is like a hilarious, funny joke that is like making a comment about the relationship between Bitcoin and Ethereum. And is like, I think he absolutely did it intentionally. Like, wouldn't it be funny if we put the rocks on Bitcoin? And that was the first collection ever put on Ordinals. Like, that was totally intentional. And to Asher's point, yeah, it's not definitely not the same level of it doesn't land the same way as the first original collection. It's a totally Bitcoin Shrooms, a completely different feeling. Word. Okay, well, cool.
Honestly, that is like I will just say that that point is like, it's like a really good argument. It's like the best, in some ways, that might be the best articulated bull case for rocks I've heard.
I think he did do it on purpose. Like, I think he was very aware of what he was doing. One thing, Raktoshi and all of his flaws, one thing is that he, I think, was incredibly calculated and intentional about both rocks and node monks. And, when he inscribed them, he had vision that when no one else had a vision for this, he knew what was coming when no one else knew what was coming. And he does deserve some credit for that.
And as a hedge fund, we have to acknowledge that as like those are incredible trades. Those are historic trades.
Also, rocks will benefit from node monks being historical, right? I mean, people do know at the end of the day that Raktoshi, it's if you know, you know, but pretty public information at this point that node monks and Bitcoin rocks have some kind of relationship. And I do think that Bitcoin rocks and node monks benefit from each other because they're part of this like incredible historical story around this Raktoshi figure that, I mean, again, controversial guy, political problems, but you just can't deny the incredible role that he's played in the development of the ecosystem. I mean, he's arguably the second most important or third most important figure in the ecosystem after Casey and Domo.
Yeah, no, I've never tried to deny or diminish his influence. I'm actually a fan of Raktoshi. I think he's a nice guy. Can you guys see my screen?
We can, yeah.
So just going back to circle back on this conversation. So these are our 4 shrooms. The first one, 865, inscription number 865, is the coin kite open dime. I might just quickly show what one looks like so people can see. So this green one is the open dime that is based on our shroom, or our shroom is based on.
Awesome. We've
And
got
then
the A16Z, which I love.
and then we have the A16Z bandit. It's like a thief with a sack of USD, which I think is funny too, is that this thief is taking its profit in USD. It's not a bag of Bitcoin. They're taking their profit in USD.
Hilarious.
And
Fiat.
yeah, it's perfect. I think it's for Unbroken Chains PFP on Twitter. I think that's like the funniest, best inscription that it could ever possibly be.
Hilarious. Okay. And then we've got the is this a bomb?
It's a bomb, yeah. It's a bomb, and it's called TikTok next block. And I just think that it's one of the cleanest, most fun ones. I just think it's like I think it's like I just love the simplicity of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like easy to your point, right? Easy to like. Same with Green Candle. Easy to like.
Easy to like and easy to recognize. So that the first 2 are sort of nichey, right? The I love the open dime coin kite one, and I love the A16Z one, but those are like very particular cultural references. Like the A16Z thing is a reference to like the 2018 shitcoin extravaganza. And the coin kite thing is obviously like sort of like a niche piece of hardware. The bomb and the candle, it's like anybody looks at those, they know that's a bomb, and they know that it's they know that 738 is a green candle. Just very quickly, I want to explain the history of 738. I tweeted about this, so this might not be like interesting to people listening if they already know. But Shroomtoshi apparently, and this is a story I heard from Daza, who was very close to Shroomtoshi and helped with the actual distribution of the shrooms when they were getting sold, that Shroomtoshi set aside 3 shrooms for his most loyal supporters as like gifts of appreciation. And that one of the 3 was this green candle.
Do we know how it got on the market? Does that mean that this gift of appreciation was just put on the market?
It wasn't actually put on the market. It wasn't even listed for sale. We had we have a broker named Oliver who we work with sometimes, and Oliver was in touch with the group. So I think it was a group of 3 people. It was being custodied by Daza, and my understanding is that it was a group of 3 people that owned it, and they wanted to sell it and distribute the coin. They wanted the money.
Interesting. Oh, it was a group of 3 who collectively owned it?
So I think Shroomtoshi didn't give it to an individual. He gave it to a group.
Interesting. Yeah, so that kind of makes sense that they might want to liquidate that, right? I mean, it's a little,
Because
yeah,
you can't
it's
divide
hard to
up
co-manage an asset like that. Yeah.
100%. It makes perfect sense. But I mean, now it's in, you know, extreme diamond hands. None of these four are moving for years.
Yeah, makes sense.
One funny thing about 875 is it's kind of like the rune symbol, the two eyes.
Yeah. I was wondering about so I can't find any explanation or lore on what exactly those eyes are. So I think it's a pixelated ordinal symbol.
That makes sense. It looks like the ordinal symbol. That's a good guess. I wonder why
True,
he
I
did
guess you can't
two.
make circles.
Yeah. So it's just eyes. It's like ordinal eyes.
Yeah.
Word. And we got okay, so and I will say, moving on beyond shroom, I mean, if there's any last comments on the shrooms, I'd be curious to hear. But so these were like kind of our four big pickups in this correction. And then we got a bunch of different node monks.
Yes. And we're not done deploying.
Yeah. But yeah. Yeah, of course. But yeah, we're we got some, these were like our good bottom scoops.
I mean, these are you know, a lot of the stuff that we trade, you know, it's just momentum based. It's just very, you know, it's directional. You know, we don't have a whole lot of like heart and soul behind the positions because, you know, we exist to make money and that's okay. But like, these are, you know, we're sharing four positions today that like I truly, truly love. Like I adore these. I think the shrooms are just, you know, really great. I do think there's a chance that the floor continues to go down. I think, you know, one of the dynamics that we had talked about, Isabel and I had talked about with the shrooms, is that some of them are obviously identifiable. Some of them are less obvious. With a little bit of thought and a little bit of research, you can figure it out. And some of them are like really weird and obscure, and are like hard to even recognize what they are. I think that those, like the really weird and obscure ones, and the ones that are sort of harder to recognize, I think those are going to consistently trade on the floor. And that's what you're seeing right now already, which is why it was important for me when these popped up on the floor to get them, because the pieces that I'm noticing that stay on the floor for shrooms are the ones that have less meaning, or the meaning is less understood.
Quick question. Like I haven't looked at the shrooms trading history recently. Is it often that something trades at a premium to floor? Because that's relatively uncommon, especially in NFTs that don't have defined metadata or traits.
They
It's
do
always
more often. From my like cursory glance at the price action, they do more often than with other collections. Like it's more common that that would happen with shrooms relative to other collections. It's not like a common experience, but I do see that happening more frequently with shrooms than other collections.
So
it's
Domo,
always a bullish thing seeing that. Like I'll give a counter example. Like whenever CryptoPunks does well, people you start seeing mid rares, what I like to call mid, or what people call mid rares, things with like not legendary traits, but like they look good, they're visually appealing, traded at a premium. And when the sentiment is low, honestly, like those kind of punks can't get liquidity unless they're basically floored. So it's always a good sign from my perspective that certain NFTs are trading at a premium. Yeah.
so you are seeing that a little bit with this, but like just to clarify, I mean, ours were all floor buys.
But they might trade as mid rares in a bull, right? I mean, I think that's sort of our point of
No,
view.
that's the hope. That's
Yeah.
definitely the, but
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I think that the thing is though, is in to Domo's point, like any evidence otherwise is good. But the truth is for these types of assets, I think you should assume that if you need liquidity in a hurry, it'll be at the floor.
Right. Word. Anything else? So we were acquiring node monks, we were acquiring shrooms, and we've been acquiring blobs
We
in
have been.
this past. We have not been acquiring puppets, but that's not necessarily because we aren't bullish so much as just we already had like a pretty substantive position in puppets and we kind of felt like risk management wise, it was time to call it. Is that accurate?
So yeah, so we have a number of puppets already, and then we had a what I consider to be a pretty large position of opiums, which is how I was expressing our like bullishness on pups.
Yeah. Anything else that we were acquiring in this like little
Not
correction?
that I feel like sharing.
Okay. How about on the rune side? So we are seeing a little pump on the rune side. Any comments about that and sort of what we're seeing with runes in the past week from either of you?
Domo, do you have anything? I've got a bunch of stuff on runes.
I mean, if it plays out like BRC 20, the majors lead, and then there's a trickle down as people realize that certain projects are underpriced. In this context, you could call it trickle down dogonomics, as dog is the leader. I feel like that could play out. I just saw that it was rejected off a billion a little bit. I wonder if that's some sort of mental resistance, and maybe that's why some of the smaller projects are catching a bit at the moment. Not to say that it'll stop there, but that's what I would be looking at from a trading perspective, seeing if the majors are flowing into some of the smaller ones, and what consensus is being arrived at about which are like the second order and third order collection or projects that people are rallying behind.
Do you guys have any thoughts on what Binance is going to do related to runes? So they've been covering they covered in their little news network when we launched our fund. They cover runes, they talk about it. They're going to list this stuff. Do you guys have any thoughts on when and what?
Maybe one comment. It does not seem that the major projects, or maybe Dog, is in a position to pay listing fees for these exchanges. So if these big exchanges were to list it, it would be on their own merit. And the reason I bring it up is I wasn't even aware that Ordi was going to be listed on Binance. So it could come as a shock to people if some of these are listed. And I don't think it will leak early. Yeah.
What are the
Who paid
listing
that?
fees like typically?
Sorry?
What are the listing fees like typically?
I don't know, but I know that it can be quite considerable.
Do you know if anybody paid Ordi's listing fee?
Perhaps that's another, maybe some whale out there paid it. I think there's also a bit of game theory from these exchanges. Like their liquidity is primarily Bitcoin on their centralized exchange, and they don't want that Bitcoin leaving their arena to go on chain to buy these assets, so they kind of are incentivized to list them quite quickly, or to funnel people to their like Web3 product. So I think that contributed as well. It's very possible someone paid the listing fee, but not that I'm aware of. It came as a shock to me.
Or they just like straight up just knew they were going to make money on the trades. I mean, like there's no doubt, right, that the volume on the centralized exchanges for Ordi was like substantively greater than anything on chain, right? So, I mean, is that also just possible? They just like took a bet on the fact that they knew that they were going to make money on trading fees?
Yeah, I mean, it's much less of a clunky experience. Like the volume's like 100x overnight. Moreover, the throughput's just higher. Yeah, I don't know. I actually at the time thought it was potentially a bearish event because of the friction it took to sell at the time on chain. I thought that the elimination of that friction would be somewhat net negative, as people was easier to sell larger positions, especially as Unisat at the time had like certain size limits, if I recall. But ultimately, that definitely wasn't the case. So again, we might see it play back with the first rune listed. It's really that trade-off is the height there that it sustains it, or which is likely, or is that lack of friction to sell a large position, does that overwhelm the hype?
Something we also noticed, a friend of ours pointed this out, was that, and we don't know if this is a pattern that will continue or if this will be relevant to runes that get listed on centralized exchanges, but there was a period of time after Ordi was listed on CXs, where Ordi's correlation with Bitcoin started to drop a little bit, and Ordi started to trade more in alignment with alts. Right. And when we had that, whenever it was like 2 or 3 months ago, when alts were just like bleeding to death and like Bitcoin dominance was really surging, Ordi was trading more like an alt at that point. And I think the theory was that it was because most of the volume was on, OKX, et cetera. And so there was more, kind of correlation with alts versus Bitcoin, maybe at that time. Again, I haven't been following enough recently to know how that's going to play. I mean, so many weird things are happening with alts and Bitcoin right now, but it'll be interesting to see if maybe there's something similar, like when these Bitcoin native assets gets listed on centralized exchanges, do they actually break with spot a little bit in terms of correlation, start to trade more like altcoins?
One other quick consideration too, and I think the exchange listing fees is a really good point. I think also what I've seen, in at least historically, is a major expense to get up and running on a centralized exchange isn't only the listing fee, but it's also like getting actual market makers lined up to provide liquidity on the order book. And if you don't have that, the exchanges just don't like it. They prefer to have those market makers there.
I feel like this is actually a really good time. So Azure, do you want to share a little bit about why you think runes may have seen it this recent pump? What are your thoughts about the runes pump that we're seeing in the last week?
So I think that it's pretty normal in these cases to have like the tokens leading the ecosystem in terms of recovery. And I think that's sort of what we saw. I think the market was sort of waiting for a bottom. And I think the stuff that's more liquid, when that bottom is found, that'll be reflected in the more liquid markets more quickly. So I think that basically what we saw was runes leading the recovery for all of Ordinals.
Yeah. Any surprises about, I mean, I guess we've kind of known that Dog's been leading for a little while.
I mean, I've been impressed and surprised with Dog's performance. I mean, we have a substantial position in Dog. We accumulated that early on, not by buying Dog directly, but basically we accumulated a bunch of rune stones at a very low cost basis, and held those until the dog tokens were distributed. That said, we've talked about Dog a number of times. I did not expect Dog to be the leading runes coin. We were positioned in it in case because, frankly, I was bullish on Leonidas and Leonidas's bullhorn, and that is exactly what we said, and that really has turned out to be extremely powerful. And like I don't think I don't think the Dog run is over. I think it's just getting started.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense in retrospect. I mean, I'm with you. I wasn't expecting it either, but it does in retrospect make sense that, for these kind of small cap, kind of small, I mean, runes are so small. They're really tiny markets, relatively speaking. It makes sense that Leonidas would have the ability to basically prop up a market like that, it's not that outlandish that he could make a giant impact just with his, megaphone. Yeah. And then our R6, I mean, how have R6 been doing? I don't know if there are any other runes collections that we want to kind of comment on.
R6 are up a lot. So R6 are at like are at like 1.3 cents. They had gone down below 1 cent. So R6 are recovering really well too. And relative to dog, I would argue underpriced.
I would, so, and I've also been hearing a lot about Manco, which is a
Let's
project
see.
that
I actually haven't looked at that today.
the people in the telegrams have been discussing. I've been seeing, like a little chatter about it in the telegrams.
Yeah, it looks pretty good. We have a small position in that. Isabel, do you want to give like an outline of what you've been talking about in terms of like the VC dynamics and sort of how you're seeing like uh like institutional investors and how they're talking about VC versus like more hedge fund type assets that we trade?
I mean, yeah, obviously where a lot of my focus has been recently because we're kind of gearing up to raise this next 5 million, right? So, uh, we've been chatting a lot with different kinds of investors, right? And I think our bread and butter for the first 5 million that we raised was traders, prop traders, people coming out of big prop trading firms that, I think have like maybe like a positive bias towards trading, really understand how trading works, want to be, allocating to managers that they trust on the trading side for these assets and see that as sort of like the best way to get exposure. We, obviously thrive in that kind of investment environment. And then I think the other kind of group that was really excited about our product and was like just like made that or initial 5 million kind of happen really easily was just like high net worth individuals in the Ordinals ecosystem who wanted to kind of have a little bit more diversified broad exposure to the ecosystem and not necessarily have all their Ordinals exposure be in individual projects that they themselves were picking and had to manage on their own, right? So I think that's, those are kind of like the two folks that really were kind of dominating our first 5 million. And this next 5 million, we've been having kind of longer term kind of initial conversations with kind of bigger institutional crypto institutional firms in crypto who by and large have made most of their money historically in venture capital in crypto. And specifically what that means in crypto, because it means something different in crypto than it does in, the normal world, is investing in protocol technologies, companies, organizations for some combination of traditional equity and token allocations at some sort of discounted price to what those tokens will be available for on the market to retail. This is where you see kind of retail. I think there's some resentment, probably warranted resentment amongst retail investors about this system, right? Where VCs kind of get inherently structurally better prices to these assets. And I think, our sort of general point of view is that this is bullish for meme coins, now that retail investors are kind of getting fatigued from having to pay the venture capitalist tax, which means the VCs get better prices early on in an asset's development. Meme coins, that's not as much of a thing, right? These meme coins tend to be fair launch. They tend to have really, really small teams that don't take huge allocations. Certainly in Ordinals and Runes, that's, Ordinals and Runes is an environment and ecosystem where you're seeing much more focus on fair launch. Obviously, Ordi was like an excellent example of that. And so venture capitalists who are looking at Ordinals, right, their initial inclination is to try to do the VC playbook of 2017, 2020 crypto world in Ordinals, which means that they're looking for like companies or protocols or tech to invest in exchange for tokens. But it's like not working as well for them as maybe it did in 2020 and 2017 and other ecosystems because Ordinals is such a simple technology, right? There's just not to disparage any particular companies. I think a lot of Ordinals companies are great investments just as like proper picks and shovels investments, but like, investing in, Ordinals bot token or, even like a Liquidium token or whatever these things might not have the same ring to it as like investing in like layer one Solana. So retail might not be as excited about eating up those, especially when they aren't getting a discount on them, versus investing in things like node monks and puppets and like, you know, these really exciting kind of meme driven, really retail focused projects. Long story short, I think, you know, what we're trying to do is present an opportunity for institutional investors to get access to the puppets and the node monks and like all of these projects that retail is really excited about. But it's a very different strategy than institutional investors of the past, right? Like institutional crypto investors of the past, who are again mostly focused on this very specific VC playbook, are used to, right? And so they have to kind of go through like some mental hurdles and kind of bureaucratic red tape. And often they have to go back to investment committees and talk to their investors about why they're changing their strategy for ordinals, because the playbook is changing, you know, the playbook is evolving. You know, there's a lot of reasons why the VC playbook of 2017 and 2021, you know, might not work as well in the Bitcoin ecosystem. As a practical matter, and this is the last point I'll make on this, I think this is why you're seeing this obsession with Bitcoin L2s from institutional investors, despite the fact that Bitcoin L2s are a little bit kind of far away in terms of really being usable, is because the crypto playbook of the past might map a little bit more easily onto L2s, right? It's like, oh, Stacks has an L2, so we can, you know, invest in Stacks L2 and get Stacks tokens, right? It's more similar to the 2017, 2020 style VC investment strategy. But it's a little bit maybe possibly shoving like a round or like a square peg into a round hole, right? I mean, they're trying to map a strategy from the past onto Bitcoin, when I think it seems to us, right, that the reason people are interested in Bitcoin native assets and the reason, you know, retail is eating up ordinals is because it doesn't fit that playbook and it doesn't fit that model. And it's a little bit more like a for the people style investment strategy that ultimately we think will benefit traders and hedge funds, funds that specialize in trading like ours. So yeah, that's kind of, I don't know what I'm noticing. There's so much I could say on this topic. I feel like I've been obsessed with this topic the past couple of weeks internally. But yeah, I'm curious if you guys have any thoughts.
I mean, I think your points are very, very, I think like relevant to the market right now. I think we've had, you know, a number of years where the venture capital firms have taken not only the spotlight, but like the mind share in terms of where investors think like disproportionate amounts of capital are going. I think that you know, we've had like a history where like the hedge fund world like just never really operated directly in these markets. And I think I think now that we're beginning to sort of dip our toes and pioneer that, I think it's you know, hopefully there'll be a lot of other firms behind us following in our footsteps.
Anything else that we want to cover today?
This was pretty good.
Yeah.
Good to have Domo on here. I hope he joins us next time.
I know, this is so great. Thank you so much for coming. Um, cool. Okay, awesome. I think that that's good for this week. It'll be interesting to see what happens. It's very possible. We said this last time, but it's very possible that next time we chat in a couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about all-time highs and a completely different environment for ordinals. So we'll see what happens.
I mean, it's already completely different than our last one. My guess is that the next one will be equally. Things are going to continue to move at that pace.
Well, I'm ready. All right, cool. All right, awesome, guys. Thank you so much. And yeah, I would say, oh, this is something that I've forgotten to do on the previous podcast. So I'm just gonna like share to all the listeners. Feel free to subscribe to this channel. This is the first time I'm ever plugging our subscription. And also, yeah, also feel free to follow us on Twitter if you don't already follow us on Twitter, and hit us up, slide into our DMs. We're around. We are you know, excited to chat with people who are interested in chatting with us. So that's all I'll say on that subject. And yeah, I'm excited for Unbroken Chain and what we're doing here. Thanks again, Domo, for coming on.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Bye,
Yeah.
guys.